500 comments. That's what happened when I said Limbus Company has a structural problem that its community refuses to look at directly. The arguments came in fast. Some of them were good enough that I went back and looked at the evidence again. I looked, and I'm still technically right. And a few of you accidentally proved my point while trying to dismantle it. Here's what the community got wrong, and the one thing they got exactly right. So let's talk about the top comment. 252 as of the recording of this likes. KJH said he's only planning 10 years, not 19 and a half, and that I did the math wrong. And look, that's fair. KJH did say 10 years in a live stream. Multiple people piled on with variations of this, and they were right to push back on that specific number. Here's the problem. That number isn't new, and it's not entirely stable. The timeline has already been adjusted before the game has even hit its halfway point. The stated plan has been revised at least twice in public-facing streams. Plans change, and that's fine. To be honest, you couldn't expect anything different from a gaming company. But you cannot use KJH said 10 years as a load-bearing pillar of your argument when KJH said has already been proven to be a moving target. The number isn't the point. The point is that any stated timeline exists inside of a live service economy that does not care about that timeline. And even if you lock the number in 10 years, that's still a problem. Like I said in my previous video, it only took me 7 years and 9 months. That's how long it took before I stopped caring about World of Warcraft's story. Not 20 years in, not even halfway. 7 years and 9 months. And you had me sitting there in Pandaria, going through the motions, logging hours without a single reason to care why. World of Warcraft launched in 2004, and Wrath of the Lich King, universally agreed to be the peak of that game storytelling, dropped in 2008. Honestly, I really liked Wrath of the Lich King, but come on, Illidan just had the drip that peaked way better in my opinion. Anyway, back to Lich King, it dropped in 2008, and by 2011, Cataclysm was already showing cracks. By 2014, Warlords of Draenor broke the community in half, and some of us stayed out of some kind of sick obligation to World of Warcraft, while me, like a lot of others, decided that the what-if scenario was what would kick us from our favorite game. That's 10 years from the launch of the game to my narrative collapse. It doesn't happen as fast for others. Some people have already left Limbus Company. You can check the comments section in the previous video due to what they see as narrative collapse. Other people are still here. You are okay being the people who are still here. But KJH's 10-year plan doesn't give Limbus Company a buffer. It gives it a deadline that lands right at the same pressure point that started killing WoW. And here's the other thing nobody in the comments section addressed. That 10-year window came from a live stream. Live streams are not contracts. They're what feels right in the moment. What sounds right for what KJH has at that moment. If year 8 comes around and the player count is down and the revenue is struggling, nobody is pulling up a timestamp from 5 years ago and holding it up to him like, look at this. A live service game runs as long as it's financially viable, full stop. I know that they had issues with Lobotomy Corporation and that they went negative for a bit with it. I get it, I do. But giving yourself a pristine image by fixing any of the bugs and making your game work in a single release game and going on in a gacha game are two different beasts. The 10-year argument doesn't defeat my point. It gives the point a due date. And even you guys are hedging your bets. Several people brought up off-ramps. KJH is apparently aware that things could go sideways, and he has exit strategies built into the structure. This means he's not 100% sure about his game and his story and his timeline either. And genuinely, it's good. It shows self-awareness, and I respect that. But I want you to think about what an off-ramp actually means. An off-ramp means the story ends before the vision is finished. It's BioWare quietly shelving the next Mass Effect rather than completing the arc they promised. It's the MCU fast-tracking storylines because Phase 4 lost the audience, and they needed to land somewhere meaningful before the whole thing falls apart, because they're kind of doing this shit right now as you're watching this video. An off-ramp is not a win. An off-ramp is a controlled landing when the fuel runs out early. A place to save yourself when you no longer have the ability to hit the brakes. The community treated this like a rebuttal, and it's not a rebuttal, it's a plan B. A plan B only matters if plan A has already failed, which is exactly what I said might happen. Not that it will, but that it might. And of course, there's the "but Alden" moment. And you know, okay, this one I actually find interesting. It's the most optimistic read in the comment section, and it's not a dumb argument. The case is this: Limbus Company isn't just Limbus Company. It's built on top of Lobotomy Corporation and Library of Ruina. The city exists. The wings exist. There's 5 years of world building underneath this game before a single sinner ever showed up. More world means more runway. And that is true, and I hear you. And it's that Project Moon did something that most developers never do. They built the lore before they built the game. The world was already lived in. That's something that matters not only to the story, but also to those of us who are experiencing the story. But here's the issue. More world means more lore debt. Every corner you build is a corner you'll eventually have to paint. The Halo Expanded Universe had novels, comics, animated series, 11 plus years of additional lore, and all of it became a liability the moment 343 Industries tried to use it, because the casual audience had no access to any of it. The hardcore lore players felt cheated when the continuity got bent. The new players felt lost when references landed without context. And the bigger the world got, the harder it became to make every part of it land for every part of the audience simultaneously. Limbus Company is already doing this. Lobotomy Corporation callbacks hit different for people who put in the hours. For everyone else, those moments are background noise. And the cracks are showing. One comment in this thread pointed out something that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mind you, this is another commenter, but the Kong family and Canto 8's flashback, the way they function, the way their social structure operated, the way they held power, that depiction has a problem. For the light from Lobotomy Corporation hadn't been properly cultivated yet in that era, which means most humans in that window would have been operating at something closer to like baseline depression, in a more hollowed out, less human state. The organized, functioning family hierarchy the flashback shows us, with their love for the world and their benevolence, doesn't fully line up with what the world should have looked like at that point in the city's history. That's a seam in the continuity. And it happened because the world got bigger, faster than the timeline could support it. Lobotomy Corporation established the conditions for that era. Limbus Company needed the Kong family to exist a certain way for Canto 8 to land. And the two things don't fully agree with each other. One seam in 3 years. A bigger universe is not a buffer against narrative fatigue. It's more surface area to maintain. One argument that I heard a lot from you guys is that there are no outside entities controlling this. KJH controls it. Kim Ji-hoon is the only one who has any say in this. And this is the argument I find the least interesting to engage with, but I mean, it is genuine critique and I'm not going to dismiss it. So, KJH controls the vision. He built the world from scratch. He has delivered across 3 games. So, as long as he's there, nothing fundamentally breaks. And if you have concerns, that's just a Western framework being applied to the Korean studio that operates differently. That's kind of the argument I'm hearing from you guys, and those are 2 different versions of this argument. I've seen both in my comment section, and I want to look at them seriously for a second. I don't want to dismiss you guys, so let's jump in. KJH is good. Truly, when it comes to his vision, Project Moon's structure, small team, creator-led, not publicly traded, does insulate it from some of the corporate pressures that turned Blizzard into a content factory. Your comments on this are not false. But here's the thing about building a narrative around a single person's vision. Kentaro Miura started Berserk in 1989 and he died in 2021. With the story unfinished, 32 years of work, one of the most meticulous world builders in the history of the medium, his studio is finishing it without him. And if you've read the chapter since, you already know it's not really the same, and it can't be. The vision was his, and when he left, that vision left with him. Akira Toriyama built Dragon Ball into a global franchise across 4 decades, and he died in March of 2024. Dragon Ball Daima was still airing, Super is unresolved, and the one person who knew exactly where everything was supposed to go, well, now he's gone. Now a committee makes calls he never would have signed off on. A bit more niche here, but we've got VC Andrews, who died in 1986, and her estate hired a ghostwriter. He has published over 80 books under her name. Most of her current audience has never read a word that she actually wrote. George R.R. Martin has been finishing The Wind of Winter for over 13 years, and HBO couldn't wait, so they improvised, and you know how that ended. R.A. Salvatore, one of my personal favorites, has written Drizzt Do'Urden since 1988. Single author, full control, no corporate interference, no live service pressure, and even Salvatore, 36 years in, has had to retcon continuity, quietly revise the rules of his own world, and contradict lore he established 2 decades prior just to keep the story moving. None of these people lost control to a corporation. None of them went Western. They ran into the same wall every long-form narrative hits eventually. Time is longer than any single person's ability to hold all the pieces together simultaneously. The KJH controls it argument assumes the threat is external, a bad investor, a hostile acquisition, a mandate from above. Those are real risks. I'm not dismissing them. But the risk I'm pointing at is internal. It's what happens to any story when the weight of its own history gets heavy enough that even the person who built it starts losing the threads. Death of the author isn't just a literary theory term. It's the operating reality for every creator with a long enough run. Not because they fail, but because the work outlasts any single person's grip on it. Not all of you had negative things to say about what I had to say, and I want to put a spotlight on a specific comment. Not because it argued against me, but because it agreed with me in a way that matters more than anything I could say. At FlyMyWings10 wrote, "There is definitely a toxic positivity problem with the Limbus community. Any form of criticism, whether constructive or blind, will rarely be considered." 104 likes from inside the community on a video that was supposed to prove me wrong. That's not my argument anymore. That's the community making my argument for me. Toxic positivity in a fandom around a live service game doesn't protect the game. It insulates the developer from feedback they actually need to hear. Blizzard had one of the most loyal, vocal, passionate fan bases in gaming for a decade, and that loyalty became a wall. Criticism couldn't get through, and the players pushing back got buried under the ones celebrating. And the people making the decisions stopped hearing anything negative coming in. I'm not saying Project Moon is Blizzard. I've already said the opposite repeatedly. But a community that can't hold a developer accountable in the good years will not have the language to do it in the bad ones. And even someone as stubborn as Kim Ji-hoon needs to be held accountable if and when he makes his missteps. Now here's the angle that almost no one in the comments section touched, and it's the more immediate problem. The story is still good, and we all agree on that part, but the gameplay loop is already showing the strain. One comment near the bottom of the thread said it cleanly. Most new content in Limbus gets consumed in 3 to 4 days. Then, dead weeks. Even identity release weeks are, quote, fancier dead weeks. And that's not a story problem, that's a retention problem. And it matters because a live service game that doesn't retain players between story drops loses the audience before the next chapter can land. You can write the best canto in the game's history, and if the player base is thinned out waiting for it, the impact is a fraction of what it should be. WoW had this exact issue. Gaps between major patches killed engagement even during strong story periods. Destiny 2's seasonal model was literally designed to solve it. Constant content, no dead weeks, and it overcorrected so far in the other direction the story became impossible to follow without a spreadsheet. This is the design trap. Too little content between story chapters and you'll lose your audience. Too much and you'll drown the narrative. Project Moon is threading that needle, and they're only in year 3. I need to acknowledge the very first comment, 123 likes, just, why are you still making Limbus videos? I thought you quit, and wouldn't you love it if I would already? You know what? Just for this, I'm going to do a video that needs like days of research just to tell you that Kirby could solo the city. Moving on. Here's what I want you to take from this. I'm not here to bury Limbus Company. I'm here because the game is good enough that this conversation matters. Bad games don't get 500 comments of pushback. Nobody writes paragraphs defending something they don't care about. And I can see that each and every one of you who left comments in the last video massively care about this topic. The games I've watched collapse weren't killed by bad developers. They were killed by the gap between what the developers wanted to build and what a live service economy forced them to build over time. The gap grows slowly and it doesn't announce itself. And by the time you notice it, the story you loved is somewhere in the rear view. And you're not even sure when you stopped caring. Hold Project Moon accountable now, not because the game is failing, but because it isn't. This is the window where that accountability actually does something. A fan base that asks hard questions while the game is good is the reason a developer keeps making good decisions. This is not a criticism. This is how you protect something you love. If this helped you understand what I meant even a little bit more, or if it forced you to dig in harder and counter-argument me even more, drop it in the comments, and I actually read them. Clearly, I'm doing an entire video reacting to them. Like and subscribe if you want more of this, and as always, be good to each other. See you in the next video. Peace.